Hi, my name's Dan Coflin, and welcome to this lesson on what does the Bible really say? Today we're going to be looking at Joseph's coat of many colors. I remember as a child hearing about Joseph's coat of many colors. Even in a Sunday school class book, I saw an artist's rendition of what that might look like. There was also a screenplay that was entitled Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. It was really popular back in the 70s. But does the Bible really say anything about Joseph having a coat of many colors? In Genesis 37:3, the King James Bible states, "Now Israel loved Joseph more than all of his children because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors." But looking at other translations, I found that 32 out of 57 English translations makes no mention of color, but simply a long-sleeved robe or tunic. The Hebrew word for colors that's used here is pas, which, according to the Strong's Concordance, means properly the palm of the hand or the sole of the foot. By implication, a long-sleeved coat. This long-sleeved coat reached to the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet, but there is no indication of color in the language. The idea of color may have been added because it was customary that the children of kings would be distinguished from others by wearing multicolored garments. No, many scholars agree that the significance of Joseph's coat was what it represented. Joseph was the firstborn son of his father Jacob and his mother Rachel. But Joseph had 10 older brothers who were born to his father by different wives. The right of the firstborn son to inherit his father's estate really did not belong to Joseph, being at that time the youngest of Jacob's sons, although he was the son of the wife Jacob loved the most. The right of the firstborn in the family was a really important position to hold. If there were 2 sons born to their father, the oldest would inherit the largest majority of his father's estate. In early days, the sons would all be employed in their father's business. And so when the father died, the eldest son became the new patriarch of the family and was then responsible for caring for his mother, his sisters and brothers, and the family business. This responsibility required the greatest portion of inheritance to maintain the family and the business. Although Joseph was not the firstborn in the family, his father had broadcast his intentions to Joseph's brothers by giving Joseph the coat that represented the favored firstborn son. Jacob, recognizing his son Joseph as his successor, fomented a great deal of jealousy among Joseph's brothers and nearly cost Joseph his life. There are many examples in Scripture where the firstborn son was passed over and the secondborn received the inheritance instead. You remember Ishmael was Abraham's firstborn son by Sarah's slave Hagar. But he was passed over, and Isaac received the inheritance as the firstborn son instead. Esau was the firstborn son of Isaac, but you remember he was passed over, and the inheritance went to Jacob. And of course, we've already looked at Joseph and the exalted position to be the favored one over his brothers. All these examples lead us to Jesus as our redeemed inheritance. If we look in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verses 45 through 50, we see that it tells us the first man was Adam. And we see in the book of Genesis that God gave man, or Adam, dominion over the earth. Genesis 2:28. And that's also confirmed in Psalms 115:16. And it tells us this: the heaven, even the heavens are the Lord's, but the earth he's given to the children of men. 1 Corinthians 15 continues to say in verse 47, the first man is of the earth earthy, the second man is the Lord from heaven. Here Jesus is called the second man. Now, how can Jesus be the second man when we know there were literally millions born between Adam and Jesus? When God created Adam, God created him in God's own image and likeness. When Adam sinned, he lost the image and likeness of God and became sinful and rebellious, unlike God. And he caused all of his unborn children to inherit that sinful nature. It wasn't until Jesus was born of Mary that a man once again had the image and the likeness of God. Adam, the first man, was created in God's image, but forfeited the inheritance God had given him. But Jesus is called the second man who carried God's image. If we look in Hebrews 1:3, it tells us that Jesus was the brightness of God's glory and the express image of his person. And verse 2 shows us that Jesus was appointed the heir of all things. We're also told in Romans 8:29 that Jesus is the firstborn of many brethren. When did Jesus, the second man, become the firstborn? Well, Colossians 1:18 tells us that Jesus is the firstborn from the dead. When Jesus had completed his mission of revealing what God is like, for he was the brightness of God's glory and express image of his person, Jesus then went to the cross, took man's sin and judgment and died, and defeated death by the resurrection, becoming the firstborn from the dead, so we could also be born again from spiritual death to spiritual life and become an heir of God with Jesus. That's what Galatians 3:29 says. If you be Christ, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. The pattern in Scripture shows us from the very beginning that the firstborn son is to receive the promise of inheritance. But often we see where the firstborn was passed over for the secondborn. Joseph had a long-sleeved coat that identified him as the father's firstborn and future patriarch. You know, Jesus also had a long-sleeved seamless coat the soldiers of the cross cast lots for. That was in John 19:23 and 24. God the Father recognized his Son as the one to inherit all things as the last Adam. 1 Corinthians 15:45. For all that are born of this Adam, that is of Jesus, receive his life and his kingdom. Thanks for joining this lesson today. Stay tuned for future lessons on what does the Bible really say.